The last ferry had gone an hour ago, and the dock was quiet enough that I could hear the loose rope on the piling tap against the wood in the tide's patient rhythm. The coffee grinder was silent, the pastry case empty, but for a single almond biscotti wrapped in cellophane like a joke about restraint. I'd turned the chairs on the patio tables upside down so the legs pointed at the sky, an unintentional little fleet of white-painted sails. I don't usually keep the lights on after closing, but tonight the overhead bulbs hummed softly, making a pale circle in the otherwise dark cafe. The street lamp outside flickered, then steadied, its own small argument with the wind. I was wiping down the counter with the kind of slowness that means you've run out of real work but aren't ready to leave. My apartment upstairs would be still, but not the kind of still I wanted. There's a difference between a room's silence and a room's listening. The door's bell gave its thin silver ring. I looked up, surprised, not afraid, but aware in the way you are when something interrupts the pattern you've already folded for the night. He stood in the doorway, the wind trying to come in with him, salt on his jacket shoulders, hair damp from spray or fog. I'd seen him before, but only in passing, on the pier, unloading crates from a fishing boat, on the street, carrying a coil of rope over one shoulder like a myth made practical, always at a distance, always moving. "Sorry," he said, stepping in. His voice had that harbor gravel in it, worn smooth by weather. "Didn't think you'd still be open." "I'm not," I said, then heard how that landed. "Not officially." He glanced at the counter, then at me. "Could I? Just something hot. I've been out there too long." He didn't point, but the dock's shape was in his tone. I set the rag aside. "Tea or coffee?" "Coffee," he said, and almost smiled. "Black." The machine hissed awake under my hand. I liked that moment, the weight of the portafilter, the grind settling like fine sand, the first bloom of steam carrying the smell that convinces you're still alive. He stood near the far end of the counter, not sitting, hands on the edge as though feeling the temperature of the place. When I slid the mug toward him, he wrapped both hands around it without looking down, as if warmth could be absorbed faster through eye contact. "Thanks," he said. The word was plain, but it stayed in the air longer than it should have. "You're welcome," I said, leaning back against the espresso machine. I hadn't asked his name, and he hadn't offered it. Some silences don't need filling right away. He took a long sip, then set the cup down with that sailor's care, balancing even on a stable surface in case it moved. "You run this place yourself?" "Mostly. A part-timer in the mornings. I like the evenings quiet." "Looks like you get them," he said, glancing at the empty tables, the chairs turned like white flags. "Most nights," I said, "except when someone wanders in after hours." He smiled properly this time, and it made him look younger, though I guessed he was maybe 30, 32 at most, the kind of young that still has options you haven't yet sorted into mistakes and stories. "I can go if I'm in the way," he offered. "You're not in the way," I said. My hand found the rag again without thinking, tracing circles on the counter in front of me. "You're just unexpected." He nodded at that, as if unexpectedness was something he knew how to wear. The wind rattled the door lightly. Somewhere down the street, a gull made that mournful bark they have when the night doesn't give them what they came for. He drank again, slower. His eyes wandered over the photographs on the back wall, the ones from before my time here, the cafe painted a paler blue, the harbor crowded with smaller boats. "My uncle used to come in here," he said suddenly. "Before he sold his boat, he said they had a jukebox." "They did," I said. "Before my time, too. It broke, and no one fixed it. We filled the space with the pastry case." "Trade-offs," he said. The coffee was half gone when he asked, "Do you ever walk the pier after closing?" "Sometimes," I said. "Not much in winter." "It's good tonight. Tide's low, you can hear the pilings breathe." I thought about the apartment upstairs, the unlistening quiet. "I could close up properly," I said. "I'll wait," he replied, as though that were the most natural arrangement in the world. The lock turned with its familiar small click. I flipped the sign to closed, not that anyone was likely to come. He finished the last of his coffee, set the mug carefully in the bus tray without being asked. When we stepped outside, the air was cool enough to keep you aware of your skin, the kind of air that doesn't rush you anywhere. The pier stretched ahead, boards dark with damp, the harbor lights doubled in the water. He walked at an easy pace, not leading, not following. At the far end we leaned against the rail, the tide making its slow arrangements with the shore. You could hear the barnacles at work if you let your ears change focus. He looked out at the black line where sea met sky. Out there you lose track of which is which. Sea and sky? Time, he said. We stayed like that long enough that I felt the hour move in my bones. When we turned back, the cafe's little sign was just aglow in the dark, as if it had been waiting to welcome us back from some longer absence. At the door he paused. "Thanks for the coffee," he said, "and the walk." "You're welcome," I said. The words felt like they belonged to something more. He hesitated, then offered his hand, warm from the mug, rough from rope. "Eli," he said. "Maris," I answered. His name stayed in my palm after he let go. "See you," he said, not making it a question. Then the wind took him back toward the dock, and I watched until the dark decided to keep him. Upstairs, the apartment was exactly as I'd left it, but the silence had learned something in the meantime. 3 nights passed before I saw him again. It was the kind of September stretch where the air changes its mind hourly, fog at dawn, hot enough by afternoon to make the gulls open their beaks in silent complaint, then a wind by evening that smells like it's been rehearsing winter somewhere far away. I'd told myself I wasn't waiting for him, but I caught my eyes glancing at the door more often than the clock. The cafe was slow, 2 tourists wandering in for sandwiches and a fisherman named Calder, who always ordered tea because coffee makes my hands shake when I'm tying knots. By 8, the street was nearly empty, just the neon bait shop sign buzzing to itself across the way. I was stacking plates when the bell rang. Eli stepped in like the weather had carried him here on purpose. No damp jacket this time, just a dark sweater, sleeves pushed up to the forearms, the faint smell of sea salt still clinging to him. He looked around like a person confirming a memory. "Evening," he said, as if he'd been practicing the words since the pier. "Evening," I replied. My hand rested on the counter a moment longer than necessary. "Coffee?" "If you're offering," he said, sliding onto one of the stools. "You still open?" "Depends who's asking," I said, and that made him smile. While the machine began its soft hiss, he glanced at the window. "Looks like the fog's coming in early tonight." "Makes the lights feel closer," I said. He tilted his head. "That's one way to put it." The smell of coffee filled the small room, curling into the corners. I set the mug in front of him. He wrapped his hands around it again, same as before, but slower this time, as though we'd both acknowledged the ritual. His knuckles were a little scraped, a constellation of small cuts. "Rope burn?" I asked. "Old pier piling," he said. "Slipped where I shouldn't have." I nodded, letting my eyes linger a second longer than politeness allowed before looking away. He took a sip. "You ever get tired of this?" He gestured around the cafe, not dismissive, just curious. "Sometimes," I said. Then the light hits the counter a certain way, or someone leaves behind a sentence worth keeping, and it feels worth opening the door again the next day. And on the days it doesn't, on those days I clean the espresso machine twice and pretend that's progress. He smiled into his cup. "Sounds familiar." We talked in the unhurried way you do when neither person is measuring the conversation for usefulness. He told me about a storm 2 winters ago that had pushed 3 boats onto the sand like toys. I told him about the time the power went out mid-December and I made cappuccinos by boiling water on the gas stove and whisking milk by hand, the customers sitting in candlelight like some unplanned holiday. The bell over the door jingled once more, Mrs. Lathrop from down the street, picking up her usual decaf for the walk home. She greeted Eli with the easy familiarity small towns grant to anyone who's been around more than a season. After she left, the place felt smaller again, like the tide had come in without us noticing. "Do you close soon?" he asked. I glanced at the clock. Technically, I should have already. He drained the last swallow of coffee, set the mug down gently. "Then I'll walk you out." It wasn't an offer so much as an agreement he assumed I'd sign. I locked the till, flipped the sign, and pulled on my coat. The fog had thickened, curling under the street lamps, making the world feel reduced to whatever we could see in front of us. We walked toward the harbor. The sound of water against the pilings was softer tonight, the tide having drawn back farther. At the far end of the pier, Eli leaned on the rail, his hands loose, as if holding on was optional. "Quieter than last time," I said. "Different kind of quiet," he answered. "This one waits." We stood side by side, looking at the blurred line between sea and sky. The fog dampened sound, even our own breathing. After a while, he turned slightly toward me. "You don't talk much about yourself," he said, not accusatory, just noticing. "I talk about the cafe," I replied. "That's not the same thing." I didn't answer right away. The wind shifted, bringing a faint creak from a moored boat. "What would you want to know?" He shrugged. "Whatever you want to tell." "That's a dangerous invitation," I said. "I'm good with dangerous," he replied, and for a moment neither of us looked away. The lights from the dock made a faint halo in the fog. Somewhere behind us a gull cried once, sharply, then stopped. Eli shifted his weight, close enough that I could feel the heat coming off him through the cool air. "Maris," he said, like he was trying the weight of my name. "I'm glad the lights were on that night." "Me too," I said. My voice felt steadier than I expected. We stayed until the damp started to settle into my sleeves. Back at the cafe door, I unlocked it to get to the stairs leading up to my apartment. He lingered in the doorway. "Good night," he said, but didn't move right away. "Good night, Eli." He gave a small nod, like he'd take the word with him. Then he stepped back into the fog, disappearing before he'd gone 10 paces. I stood in the doorway until the air filled the space where he'd been. Upstairs I could still smell the salt on my coat.